You heard a month ago in our interview with Rick Grasby how grazing corn stalks after harvest can improve soybean yield the following year. But with those cows in fields and in other locations across the state, there are some things you can be doing before winter arrives. Earlier this week, UNL Extension beef veterinarian Richard Randle joined us at the ARDC to discuss a few checklist items farmers and ranchers can go over before the weather turns colder.
Certainly a lot of things going on this time of the year, depending on where you are in the state. Weaning calves, thinking about preg-checking, looking at winter feeding stores, and a number of those things like that.
Let's look at preg-checking. How much has gone on, and what are you looking for when you go out to check those cows?
Well, I think, it's always important to identify those cows that are not pregnant, so you can make a decision what to do with them, whether to call them immediately, maybe feed them and add some weight to them later. Obviously this year there's a lot of different things going on. Some people are even looking at maybe holding those cows and trying to breed them for fall calving, so that takes some all planning up front to think about what you're going to have in the winter feeding program in terms of animals.
They're much more valuable than they were a year or two ago.
They certainly are, and we've had a pretty good summer, a lot more feed, reasonable cost feed out there, so it makes for making some decisions a little differently than normal maybe.
For your cows that have calved before and for your first time heifers, what kind of body condition would you like them in heading into winter?
Well, we always like to look at them, at preg-check time. We're weaning calves off of them. We'd really like to see them at least in that body condition score of 5 as a minimum. The thing about if those cows were thin, the data would tell us that it's probably more economical to recondition those cows to some degree before you get into the harsh winter feeding rather than try to put that weight back on them during that harsh weather. So if there happen to be a group of thin cows or problem cows, it'd be worth considering what it needs to bump that condition back up to a 5 before you get into that heavy winter feeding situation.
Talk about getting ready for winter. What are some things to look at with eyes, ears, feet, udders, things like that?
Yeah, certainly at preg-check time, in addition to determine the pregnancy status of those animals, it's always a good time to go through them and check for confirmation and structural soundness. Look for eye problems, look for ear, feet and leg problems, teeth, what kind of age we have on those animals, and determine, even though some of those animals might be pregnant, they might not be best to hang on in a particular winter feeding program, depending on your situation. So again, gives you some options to determine how to have the best set of cattle for the resources that you have going into that winter feeding program.
You said some of the rain that we've recently had could be good grounds for maybe worms. You think that might be a treatment area?
Yeah, always when we, obviously warm weather and moisture are two of the primary factors that promote sustainability of those parasites when they're out on that pasture. And so coming out of grazing season, it's a good time at fall preg-check to booster any vaccinations that you want for those diseases that would likely potentially affect the latter half of reproduction, and to clean up those animals from standpoint of internal and external parasites both. So we're looking at treating for worms, for internal parasites, looking at treating potentially for lice and grubs at some point, whether it's probably a little early for some of those, but you would be looking at, in January and those types of things, watching for signs of lice and making sure that you're going to get those controlled as you go through the winter.
Anything else related to weaned calves, things you should be looking for, a checklist to go through?
Well, obviously, you're looking at things that as those calves are weaned, we go through that stress of weaning, so boosting those vaccinations that needs to be, looking at marketing plans when you have that, and what's your plan in place for replacement heifers. If you're going to hold back heifers, your feeding program for them to grow them appropriately so that they're going to be where they need to be next spring when you're ready to breed. So that all goes into that, and again, boosting those vaccinations and those types of things in those animals become important.
If you're interested in learning more about cornstalk grazing after harvest, you can view our interview with Rick Grasby from the September 26th episode of Market Journal.